It was a quiet Friday evening in a parking lot outside a Walmart in Columbus, Ohio. The kind of place where nothing special happens, just people loading groceries, engines starting, carts rolling across the pavement. And sitting inside a slightly used Toyota Camry was a guy named Daniel, staring at his phone with a message that didn't look like much, but felt heavier than anything he had seen in years. Your auto loan has been fully paid. That was it. No celebration, no confetti, just a simple confirmation. But for Daniel, it felt like something just ended, or maybe something just began. For the past 5 years, that car wasn't just transportation. It was a monthly obligation that followed him everywhere, $412 every single month, no matter what was happening in his life. When he first got the car, it felt like progress. He had just landed his first stable job after college, signed the papers, drove off the lot feeling like he was stepping into adulthood. The payment didn't feel heavy back then. It felt normal. Everyone around him had one. Friends, coworkers, even people younger than him. A car payment was just part of life. But over time, that payment became invisible, not because it disappeared, but because it became routine. It blended into his life so smoothly that he stopped questioning it. Salary came in, bills went out, car payment included, and everything kept moving. And this is where most people miss something important. Just because something feels normal doesn't mean it's small. It just means you've gotten used to it. So when Daniel saw that message, sitting there in that parking lot, he didn't feel excited right away. He felt different. Because for the first time in years, there was no next payment waiting, no due date, no automatic deduction, just silence. And that silence felt unfamiliar. He drove home that night, same route, same traffic, same car, but everything felt slightly different. Not dramatically, not in a way you could explain to someone else, but internally, something had shifted. Because what he didn't realize before is that debt, even manageable debt, shapes your behavior in ways you don't fully notice until it's gone. For years, Daniel had been making financial decisions with that payment in the background. Every budget calculation, every spending choice, every moment he thought about saving or investing, that $400 was already spoken for. It wasn't his. It belonged to the system he had signed into. And now, suddenly, it was his again. At first, it felt like extra money, like a small raise without changing jobs. $400 a month doesn't sound life-changing on paper, especially in the US, where expenses stack quickly. But psychologically, it hits differently, because it's not new money, it's reclaimed money, money you are already earning but couldn't fully use. And this is where the first real change begins, not in your bank account, but in your mindset. Because when a fixed obligation disappears, your perception of income shifts. Daniel started looking at his paycheck differently. Before, he would see the full amount and immediately subtract what had to go out. Rent, utilities, insurance, car payment. What remained felt like his actual income. Now that calculation changed. There was more left over, and more importantly, there was more flexibility. But here's the part most people don't expect. That extra money doesn't automatically improve your life, because your habits are still built around your old structure. Daniel didn't suddenly become smarter with money just because his loan was gone. In fact, the first instinct most people have is to spend that extra space. It feels like relief, and relief often turns into reward. Maybe upgrading something, maybe eating out more, maybe finally buying things you delayed. And there's nothing wrong with that in moderation, but this is where a hidden trap appears. Because if you're not intentional, you replace one payment with another. Daniel noticed this quickly. The thought crossed his mind. Maybe it's time for a new car. Something better, something newer. His current car was fine, but now that the loan was gone, he felt like he had earned an upgrade. And that's how the cycle usually resets. Pay off one loan, start another, and stay in the same position without realizing it. But something stopped him. Not fear, not hesitation, but awareness. He realized that for the first time since he was 23, he had a fully paid asset. A car that required maintenance and insurance, yes, but no debt attached to it. And that realization felt more valuable than the idea of upgrading. This is where the psychological shift deepens, because debt creates a constant baseline of pressure, even if it's small. You may not think about it every day, but it's always there, influencing your decisions. Removing it doesn't just free up money, it frees up mental space. And mental space changes how you think about everything. Daniel started noticing that he felt slightly less stressed about unexpected expenses. Not because he had a huge emergency fund, but because he had more room to handle things. A repair, a bill, a small setback didn't feel as heavy anymore. And that feeling is subtle but powerful, because financial stress isn't always about being broke. It's about having no margin. For years, his margin was thin. Now it was starting to open up. And once that margin exists, new possibilities appear. Not instantly, not dramatically, but gradually. Daniel started thinking about things he had ignored before. Investing more seriously, building savings faster, maybe even changing jobs without fear of missing a payment. Because now his baseline cost of living had decreased. And when your baseline drops, your options increase. This is something normal financial advice doesn't emphasize enough. It focuses on income growth, which is important, but reducing fixed obligations can be just as powerful, because every dollar you don't owe is a dollar you control, and control is what creates freedom, not just income. Daniel didn't have everything figured out yet. He wasn't suddenly financially independent, but he was in a different position than he was a week ago, not just financially, but mentally, and that's where everything starts changing. If you've ever paid off a loan or you're close to it, you probably understand this feeling, that quiet shift, that subtle difference in how money feels. And if you're still in the middle of it, still making those monthly payments, then what comes next is something you need to hear. If you're getting value from this, make sure you like, subscribe, and join Prime Gorilla, because in the next part, we're going deeper into what actually changes after that payment disappears, and why most people waste this moment without realizing it. The first few weeks after Daniel paid off his car loan didn't feel dramatic, but they felt different in a way he couldn't ignore. The same paycheck was coming in, the same bills were going out, but there was a gap now where that car payment used to be. And at first, it just sat there. Extra money, unassigned, almost like his brain didn't know what to do with it yet. Because for 5 years, that money already had a purpose before it even reached him. Now, it didn't. And that kind of freedom, even in a small amount, can feel unfamiliar if you're not used to it. This is where most people make a mistake without realizing it. They treat the end of a loan like the beginning of spending power instead of the beginning of financial leverage. Because emotionally, it feels like relief, like you've been holding your breath and finally get to exhale. And when people feel that relief, they reward themselves. Daniel felt it too. The thought came back again, stronger this time. Maybe it's time to upgrade the car. Something newer, something nicer, something that matches where he is in life now. After all, he had just freed up $400 a month. It felt logical. But that's exactly how the cycle repeats. One loan ends, another one begins, and nothing really changes except the model of the car. The payment stays, the pressure stays, and the illusion of progress continues. Daniel paused this time, not because he couldn't afford it, but because he started seeing the pattern clearly. That $400 wasn't extra income, it was recovered control, and using it to create another obligation would put him right back where he started. So instead of reacting, he observed. He let that money sit for a while without assigning it immediately, and that space gave him clarity, because for the first time in years he could actually decide where that money should go, instead of following a fixed system. And once you have that choice, everything becomes strategic instead of automatic. He started small. Instead of spending it, he redirected part of it into savings. Not in the old way where saving felt like a slow, passive process, but in a way that felt intentional. He built up his emergency fund faster than before, and the difference was noticeable. Not just in the number itself, but in how he felt. Every extra $1,000 created a layer of confidence, because now unexpected situations didn't feel like threats, they felt manageable. At the same time, he began investing more consistently. Before, investing felt like something he would do when he had extra money. But now, that extra money existed every single month. And instead of letting it disappear into random expenses, he gave it a direction. And over time, that consistency started compounding, slowly but visibly. And that visibility matters because it reinforces the behavior. But the biggest change wasn't in his savings or investments. It was in how he made decisions.
Before, every financial choice had a constraint attached to it. Now, that constraint was slightly loosened, and that changes how you think. Daniel started noticing that he wasn't as reactive with money anymore. He didn't feel the same urgency to spend or the same anxiety about holding back. There was balance. He also became more aware of how much of his past behavior was shaped by that monthly payment. The way he budgeted, the way he avoided certain risks, the way he planned his future. That payment had been quietly influencing everything, and now that it was gone, he could see it clearly, which made him question something deeper. How many other decisions in his life were being shaped by obligations he hadn't fully examined? This is where the psychological shift expands beyond just the car loan. Because once you experience the removal of one fixed expense, you start looking at all the others differently. Subscriptions, unnecessary bills, lifestyle costs that feel normal but aren't essential. Daniel didn't cut everything out. He didn't become extreme, but he became aware, and awareness leads to control.
He also started thinking differently about income. Before, his focus was mainly on earning enough to cover everything comfortably. Now, with a lower baseline, his income had more power. The same salary now created more room, and that room could be used to build something, not just maintain something. He even considered the idea of reducing his dependency on his job over time, not immediately, not recklessly, but as a long-term direction. There was also a noticeable shift in his stress levels, not a complete transformation, but a reduction. Because financial stress isn't always about how much you earn, it's about how much you owe. And when that number decreases, your mental load decreases with it. Daniel felt more relaxed about small things. A repair, a bill, an unexpected expense didn't trigger the same reaction as before. And that kind of mental freedom is hard to quantify, but easy to feel. At the same time, he saw how easy it would have been to miss this opportunity completely. If he had upgraded his car, taken on another loan, or allowed that extra money to disappear into lifestyle inflation, nothing would have changed. Same structure, same pressure, same cycle. And that realization made him appreciate this moment even more. Because paying off a loan isn't just about being done with debt, it's about what you do next. Most people don't pause long enough to ask that question. They just move forward automatically. And that's why their financial situation doesn't improve, even after major milestones. Because milestones don't create change. Decisions after milestones do. Daniel didn't have everything optimized. He wasn't maximizing every dollar or following some perfect system, but he was intentional. And intention creates direction. Instead of drifting back into the same pattern, he was building something different, slowly, consistently, without pressure. And that's the real shift that happens after paying off a car loan. It's not about the car, it's about the space it creates. Financial space, mental space, decision-making space. And what you do with that space determines whether your life actually changes or just looks like it did. If you're at this stage or getting close to it, understand this. That extra money is not your reward, it's your opportunity. And if you treat it casually, you'll lose it just as easily as you gained it. But if you treat it intentionally, it can become the foundation for something much bigger. If this is making you see money differently, make sure you like, subscribe, and join Prime Gorilla. Because in the final part, we're going to break down what happens when you actually use this moment the right way, and how it can completely change your financial trajectory over time. Months passed, and what started as a small shift in Daniel's finances began turning into something much bigger. Not because his income suddenly increased or because he made some perfect investment, but because his entire relationship with money had changed. That $400 a month was no longer just extra. It had become intentional. It had direction. And over time, direction is what separates people who stay stuck from people who move forward. The first real difference showed up in his confidence. Not loud confidence, not something visible to others, but a quiet sense of control. Before, every financial plan he made had a fixed constraint built into it. Now, that constraint was gone, and the space it created allowed him to think differently about his future. He started planning not just for the next month, but for the next few years. Saving wasn't just about safety anymore. It became about positioning. Investing wasn't just something he tried occasionally. It became part of his system. And the more consistent he became, the more he started seeing results that felt real.
His emergency fund grew faster than it ever had before, and not alone changed how he experienced life. Because once you have enough cushion, you stop reacting emotionally to every expense. A repair doesn't feel like a problem, it feels like something you can handle. A temporary setback doesn't feel like a crisis, it feels like a situation. And that difference is huge because it removes the constant background stress that most people carry without even realizing it. At the same time, his investments started building momentum, not in a way that made him rich overnight, but in a way that proved something important. That consistency works when you give it time and space. And that space came directly from eliminating that one obligation. Because before, he didn't just lack money to invest, he lacked margin. And without margin, even good decisions become hard to maintain.
Another shift started happening in how he approached his job. For the first time, he didn't feel completely tied to it. He still showed up, still worked, still performed, but the pressure was different. Before, losing his job would have immediately disrupted everything. Now, while it wouldn't be ideal, it wouldn't break him. And that changes how you carry yourself. You're less afraid to speak up, less desperate to hold on to something that doesn't fully align with you, because you know you have some level of control outside of it. This is where the real transformation happens, not when your income changes, but when your dependency decreases. Daniel wasn't financially independent yet, but he was less dependent than before, and that difference gave him options, small ones at first, but meaningful. The option to take time to think before making decisions, the option to say no to things that didn't make sense, the option to consider different paths without immediate pressure. He also became more disciplined, but not in a forced way. It wasn't about restricting himself or following strict rules. It was about clarity. Once he saw how powerful that one change had been, paying off the car and not replacing the payment, he started applying the same thinking to other areas. He looked at his expenses differently, not asking, "Can I afford this?" but asking, "What does this cost me long term?" And that question alone filtered out a lot of unnecessary spending. Socially, he noticed something interesting. Conversations around money didn't change for most people. Friends still talked about upgrading cars, financing things, taking on new payments as if it was normal. And it is normal, but now he could see the pattern clearly. The constant cycle of earning and committing, without ever creating space. And for the first time, he wasn't part of that cycle anymore. Not completely free from it, but no longer fully controlled by it either. There was a moment that made everything clear. He was sitting at home one evening, looking at his finances. Nothing special happening, just a regular day. And he realized something simple but powerful. His life felt lighter. Not because he had more money than everyone else, but because he had fewer obligations pulling on him. And that lightness is what most people are actually chasing when they try to earn more. They think more income will solve the pressure, but often it's reducing commitments that creates the biggest difference. Over time, that $400 a month turned into something much bigger than its original value. It became investments, savings, flexibility, and most importantly, awareness. Because once you experience what it feels like to remove one financial weight and actually keep the space it creates, you start wanting more of that. Not in a greedy way, but in a controlled, intentional way. You start optimizing your life for freedom, not just for appearance. And that's the part most people miss when they pay off a car loan. They celebrate the end of the payment, but they don't protect the space it creates. They replace it, reset the cycle, and stay in the same position without realizing it. Daniel didn't do anything extraordinary. He just didn't restart the cycle, and that alone changed his trajectory. He wasn't perfect. There were still moments where he thought about upgrading, moments where spending felt tempting, moments where discipline felt tiring. But now he had something stronger than impulse. He had perspective. He knew what it felt like to be tied to a payment, and he knew what it felt like to be free from it. And once he's experienced both, the choice becomes clearer. In the end, paying off the car loan didn't change his life instantly. It changed the direction of his life. And direction is what determines where you end up. Not speed, not intensity, but consistency in the right path. That one decision to not replace the payment, to use it intentionally,
To understand its value, set everything else in motion. And that's the real message. It's not about the car. It's about what happens when you remove one financial obligation and choose not to fill that space again. Because that space is where freedom begins. Small at first, almost unnoticeable, but powerful over time. If this made you look at your money differently, make sure you like, subscribe, and join Prime Gorilla. Because here, we don't just talk about earning more. We talk about keeping control, building space, and creating a life that actually feels free, not just looks successful.
If this video opened your eyes, make sure you subscribe, because what you learn today can save your future tomorrow.